Hi there, I'm Skylar. I thought my 35th birthday would be the perfect moment to share the biggest news of my life that I was expecting. But instead, my mom stole the spotlight, leaving me invisible in my own story. How did a celebration meant for joy turn into the loneliest night of my life? What happens when your family chooses to erase you, little by little? What time are you listening to this? And where are you watching from? Drop a comment below. I'd really love to hear your story too. The cake with the wrong name. The evening air was thick with the scent of gardenias when I stepped through the front door. A chorus of greetings rose up, bright and practiced, and for a fleeting moment, I let myself believe it was genuine. The house looked the same, warm lights, polished wood floors, the clink of glasses, but there was an edge to it, a brittle kind of perfection that didn't feel like home anymore. I smoothed the front of my dress and smiled as best I could, weaving through the crowd. Everywhere my mother's touch lingered, centerpieces perfectly arranged, hors d'oeuvres lined up like little soldiers. It was her party, really. I was just the excuse. Someone called my name. I turned to see Evelyn, glass raised, summoning me toward the center of the room. My heart gave a nervous flutter. This was it, the moment I'd planned to hint at my news, to feel like part of something bigger than myself. The lights dimmed slightly and a few voices hushed. Out came the cake, grand and glowing with candles. I leaned forward, ready to read my name scrawled proudly in icing, but it wasn't there. "Happy birthday, Erin," the cake announced in loopy pink letters. For a second, I thought maybe my eyes were playing tricks on me, but the polite chuckles from the guests, awkward, stilted, confirmed the worst. Evelyn waved a hand breezily, laughing, "Well, Erin is practically my second daughter anyway." The blood drained from my face and I forced a small smile, as if to say it didn't matter, as if it hadn't just punched the air from my lungs. Before the laughter could die out, Evelyn kept going, her voice ringing too loud. Honestly, sometimes I think Erin's more like a real daughter than Skylar is. The room tensed. A few people coughed or looked away, pretending to be absorbed by their drinks. I stared down at the flickering candles, each tiny flame a silent witness. I pressed my palms against the table, willing myself not to move, not to cry. In the back of my mind, memories stirred. Birthday parties where my cake had been forgotten altogether. School plays where no one showed up. The constant reaching, the endless falling short. Somewhere deep inside, a quiet resignation settled in. Tonight wasn't about me. It never had been. The crowd had already started to murmur again, shifting uncomfortably, ready to move past the awkwardness. Evelyn clinked her glass, steering attention elsewhere, and the moment slid away like it had never happened. But I stayed still, staring at the cake, my name nowhere to be found. I made a silent promise to myself as my nails dug into the underside of the table. This would be the last time they laughed at me and expected me to smile. The party where I didn't exist. I drifted back into the crowd, my smile stitched tight, hoping no one saw the way my hands trembled. Conversations buzzed around me, but they slid off my skin like rain on wax. A few glances flicked my way, some awkward, some pitying, but most people simply carried on, their laughter too loud, too easy. I stood there, invisible at my own celebration. A familiar voice floated to me from across the room. "Oh, it's so nice of Evelyn to host such a lovely gathering." I turned slightly, catching the sight of my cousin, drink in hand, chatting animatedly with one of Evelyn's friends. Neither of them corrected the slip. Neither of them even paused to wonder why I wasn't mentioned. I swallowed the lump rising in my throat, feeling it settle heavy in my chest. Not once tonight had anyone said, "Happy birthday, Skylar." Not once had anyone looked me in the eye and said they were happy for me. It was Evelyn's night, her performance, and I was just another prop she arranged neatly into the background. My fingers itched for something solid, something real. I pulled out my phone and opened the family group chat, a last-ditch attempt to find proof that maybe, somewhere, I mattered. There it was, posted by Evelyn earlier that afternoon. "Everyone, join us tonight at my place for a special evening. No mention of my name, no mention of my birthday, just a special evening as though it was some generic cocktail party or a charity fundraiser." I scrolled further, searching, desperate. Pictures of centerpieces, a selfie of Evelyn setting up the food table, another post about how grateful she was to celebrate life's blessings, surrounded by family and friends. I wasn't mentioned once. I locked my phone with a shaky breath, the screen going dark in my hand. It wasn't just tonight. It was every silent moment, every second of being overlooked, brushed aside, made to feel smaller and smaller until even my own existence could be edited out without anyone noticing. The lights seemed harsher now, glaring down on me like interrogation lamps. The cheerful music grated against my ears. Every laugh, every clink of a glass, every passing smile felt like a personal betrayal. I stood perfectly still in the middle of the party, feeling the air press down heavier and heavier on my shoulders. I didn't belong here, not tonight, maybe not ever again. Without really thinking, I reached for my untouched glass of champagne. The bubbles inside had dulled, rising lazily to the surface, only to vanish. I watched them pop one by one, the soft fizzing sound barely audible over the noise. They erased me from tonight, I thought, bitterness blooming sharp behind my ribs. What else have they erased? I set the glass down with a quiet clink, my hand trembling slightly. The night spun on without me, and somewhere deep in the hollow space left behind, something fragile and angry began to grow. Forgotten faces on the wall. I moved away from the buzzing crowd, my heels tapping lightly against the hardwood floor. The noise dimmed behind me as I slipped into the living room, desperate for a pocket of quiet. The room was bathed in the soft glow of evening lights, the scent of polished wood and aging paper thick in the air. Across one wall stretched the gallery, photographs neatly framed, lovingly arranged, smiling faces, holidays frozen in time, moments captured and preserved like treasures. I stepped closer, drawn in by habit, by the faint hope of finding myself among them. The first few rows were familiar. Childhood birthdays, beach trips, awkward school photos. There I was, smaller, younger, grinning with missing teeth. But as I moved down the wall, the images blurred into something unfamiliar. There was Erin at her college graduation, Evelyn at a charity gala, Donovan beaming proudly next to grandchildren who weren't even blood. But me? Nothing. No photos from my college years, none from when I opened my flower shop, no pictures of the milestones I had quietly stacked one after another, waiting for someone to notice. My presence stopped somewhere around my 18th birthday, as if I had ceased to exist the moment I stepped out of Evelyn's house and into my own life. I stared at the wall, my heart sinking slowly, heavily, like a stone dropped into deep water. I forced a small laugh and turned to Evelyn, who happened to pass by carrying a tray of empty glasses. "Looks like I disappeared after high school," I said lightly, the words sharp-edged beneath the softness. She glanced up, her smile easy, unbothered. "Well, honey, we didn't have many good ones of you after you moved out," she said with a chuckle, loud enough for a few nearby guests to hear. "You were busy with your little projects." A ripple of polite laughter followed her comment. I smiled too, because what else was there to do? Smile and nod and pretend it didn't scrape something raw inside me. The air around me thickened, the room suddenly too small, too bright. It wasn't just tonight. It had been building for years, tiny slights, careful omissions, the quiet way I was edited out of their story. I didn't leave because I was restless. I left because staying meant erasing myself piece by piece. If you're not seen, I thought, my hands curling into fists at my sides, maybe it's easier to leave. My gaze caught on the reflection in the window across the room. The party behind me blurred into shimmering colors, laughter spilling out like smoke. My own image stared back, half visible, washed out by the lights and noise. Half there, half gone. The perfect metaphor for my place in this family. I turned away from the wall of forgotten faces, from the girl I used to be, from the hope that someone might ever hang my picture again. Maybe it was time to stop looking for my face on their walls. Words behind my back. I slipped into a quieter hallway, needing distance from the noise that grated against my skin. The laughter sounded forced now, like a symphony of masks cracking. My feet moved of their own accord, carrying me toward the back of the house where the lights were dimmer, the air cooler. Guests gathered in small knots, wine glasses dangling from lazy fingers. I passed them unnoticed, a ghost in my own story. Near the kitchen, a door stood slightly ajar. I paused, my body tense with something I couldn't name, and that's when I heard it. Evelyn's voice, sharp and clear, cutting through the soft clatter of plates. "Skylar's always been a dreamer," she said to a woman I barely recognized. one of those friends she paraded out during important events. Never quite got her feet on the ground. It's sweet, but childish. The word struck harder than I expected, a fresh sting on skin already bruised. I pressed back against the wall, wishing I could melt into it. I wasn't supposed to hear that, or maybe I was. Maybe she knew exactly where I was standing. I closed my eyes, willing the tears not to fall, but they pooled stubbornly anyway. The conversation shifted. Evelyn laughed, a low, easy sound. "Maybe this pregnancy will finally tether her down," she said. "Keep her busy so she stops meddling in things she doesn't understand." I froze, breath locked in my chest. There it was. The truth she would never say to my face, laid bare without shame. I wasn't a daughter to be celebrated. I was a problem to be managed, an embarrassment to be hidden under the guise of concern. The nausea hit me harder than the morning sickness ever had. I backed away from the door, the hallway blurring at the edges of my vision. My ears rang, my hands shook. Every fiber of me screamed to run, to scream, to tear down the carefully crafted image Evelyn projected to the world. But I didn't. I stood there, absorbing it all like a sponge already soaked to its limit. No apology, no confrontation, no heart-to-heart conversation could fix this. Because it wasn't about a single moment. It was about a lifetime of being a cautionary tale in her eyes. I wasn't Skylar niece, her daughter. I was a warning to others about what not to become. I pulled out my phone, staring at the blank screen. The soft hum of party chatter buzzed faintly in the distance, but it may as well have been a different world. For a second, my thumb hovered over the Ride app. It would be easier to stay, to smile through the humiliation, to pretend like none of it mattered. But I knew, deep in the hollowed-out space where love was supposed to live, that if I stayed, I would never leave. I tapped the screen, confirmed the pickup. A simple act, but it felt like setting a match to everything I had quietly accepted for far too long. Silenced and labeled. I hovered near the edge of the room, close enough to feel the warmth of the crowd, but far enough to stay invisible. My hand grazed the doorframe, steadying myself against the whirl of conversations, clinking glasses, and bursts of laughter that now sounded like static in my ears. The choice weighed heavy: slip away quietly or stand up and risk being crushed again. I wiped my palms against the sides of my dress and took a breath that trembled too much to feel brave. I stepped forward, crossing the invisible boundary between watcher and participant, and moved toward the small platform where family announcements were usually made. Someone handed me a microphone without thinking. It was automatic, like muscle memory from past parties when I had something innocent to say. I raised it to my lips, clearing my throat. A few heads turned. A ripple of attention washed over me. Curious, expectant, I opened my mouth, and Evelyn's voice cut through the room, bright and breezy. "Let's keep the evening light, shall we?" She waved a hand, flashing a dazzling smile, and the laughter picked up again, neatly drowning me out. The microphone slipped a little in my hand. I caught it before it fell, cheeks burning hotter than the candles on the cake earlier. I lowered the mic, the chant slipping through my fingers like sand. Another moment gone, another silence stuffed down my throat. Before the humiliation could fade, Evelyn turned to a group nearby, her voice carrying just enough for others to hear. "You know," she said with a little chuckle, "Skylar's always chasing these little flower shop dreams, bless her heart." A soft chorus of polite laughter followed. Not loud, not mean, just enough to wound in a way that left no bruises anyone could see. I stood frozen, feeling every gaze that flicked my way. Not admiration, not support, pity. My stomach twisted so tightly I thought I might be sick. I stared at the polished wood floor, willing myself not to cry, not to crumble in front of them. Slowly, I set the microphone back onto the stand, fingers steady in a way my heart was not. Nearby, a glass of wine sat unattended. I picked it up, raised it slightly as if toasting the empty air, and murmured under my breath, "Better to build flowers than rot in bitterness?" A few people nearby heard. I saw the shift, the discomfort, the unease, but no one said a word. Good. Let them sit with it. I placed the glass back down, untouched. My eyes met Evelyn's across the room. For once, I didn't look away. I didn't shrink. I let the cold, unspoken challenge settle between us like smoke curling in the air. She smiled, sweet and sharp as a knife, but I smiled back, colder, cleaner, the kind of smile that didn't ask for forgiveness or permission. You tried to shrink me, I thought, feeling the storm gather behind my ribs. You're about to see me grow. The gift tossed away. I slipped away from the buzz of the party, the laughter that now sounded hollow, the clinking of glasses that felt like nails on a chalkboard. My head was pounding, not from the wine I hadn't touched, but from the shame still pulsing through my veins. I wandered toward the far end of the room, where a decorative screen shielded a small table stacked with gifts. It was quieter here, the kind of quiet that didn't soothe but echoed. My eyes scanned the piles automatically until they landed on a familiar shape. My gift. I had spent hours picking it out, weeks designing it. A handmade frame, delicately engraved with the words, "Family is forever." A small, stupid hope wrapped in tissue and tied with a lavender ribbon. Now it lay half-buried under crumpled napkins and forgotten party favors. The ribbon torn, the frame scratched, dented at one corner as if someone had dropped it or thrown it without care. My throat tightened. I reached out, brushing a speck of frosting from the glass surface, and cradled the frame in my hands. It was supposed to be a symbol of connection, of trying again, of forgiveness. Instead, it was trash. I tightened my grip, feeling the corners dig into my palms. Something inside me, something brittle and fragile, snapped cleanly in two. I wasn't an afterthought. I wasn't a mistake. I wasn't disposable. Driven by an impulse I barely understood, I crouched next to the bin behind the table. The smell of stale cake and cheap wine wafted up, thick and nauseating. And there, wedged beneath a pile of paper cups and sticky plates, was the rest of it. The gift bag I had so carefully chosen, the card I had written, pouring out every word I could never say aloud, crushed, stained, not an accident, deliberate. My hands shook, not with sadness this time, but with a cold, searing clarity. I didn't cry. I didn't even blink. I wiped off the frame with the hem of my dress, held it close to my chest for a breath that felt heavier than the world itself, and turned away from the pile of debris Evelyn called celebration. I walked it outside to my car, every step steady, deliberate. The night air was cool against my skin, clearing the fog from my head. As I placed the frame gently on the passenger seat, I whispered to the empty street, "You may toss me away, but you don't get to define me." When I returned to the house, it was like slipping back into a theater where the play had gone on without me. Evelyn laughed too loudly at some joke. Donovan clapped someone's shoulder. A few guests twirled wine in their glasses, oblivious. I didn't seek anyone out. I didn't force a smile. I stood by the doorway, watching, unseen, but no longer desperate to be pulled into their orbit. Evelyn caught my gaze from across the room. She looked triumphant, radiant under the soft chandeliers. She didn't know what she had discarded tonight. She didn't know she had discarded me. Betrayal at the breaking point. The air outside hit me like a slap, sharp and cool against my burning skin. I leaned against the porch railing, my fingers wrapping tightly around the worn wood, grounding myself against the rising tide inside my chest. Footsteps creaked behind me. "Skylar?" Tammy's voice was soft, almost apologetic. I didn't turn right away. I wasn't sure I could look at her and not shatter. She came to stand beside me, a little too close. I caught a whiff of her perfume, something sweet and heavy, and it turned my stomach. "I didn't want you to hear it like this," she started, voice cracking at the edges. "But I think you should know." I turned then, slowly, forcing my gaze to meet hers. Tammy wrung her hands together, looking everywhere but at me. "Your mom, she offered to help with my kids' school tuition." The words landed with a dull thud. Not a bomb, but a slow, grinding collapse inside me. It all clicked. The way Tammy had distanced herself all night, the polite smiles, the quick exits from conversations that got too real. "You took it," I said, my voice calm, too calm. Tammy's eyes filled with tears. "It's not like that. I mean, it's been hard." And she made it sound like it was just help, no strings attached. I laughed then, a small, broken sound. "There are always strings, Tammy. You just didn't care enough to see where they were tied." The night buzzed around us, the party in full swing just a few feet away, oblivious to the crumbling happening out here. "You didn't stand up for me," I said, voice shaking now, not with fear but with something heavier. "Not when it mattered, not when you knew." Tammy flinched. "I didn't know what to do," she whispered. "I didn't want to be in the middle. You made a choice," I said, my words hard and cold. "You chose her. You chose safety, money, approval, everything we built. You tossed it away like it was nothing. She reached for me, a broken plea in her gesture, but I stepped back. The distance between us wasn't just physical. It was a chasm now, wide and permanent. I needed you, I said, barely above a whisper, and you left me standing alone. Tammy's face crumpled, tears spilling freely now, but I felt no sympathy, only a hollow ache where our friendship used to live. Without another word, I turned and walked back into the house. No goodbye, no apology, nothing left to salvage. The heat of the room washed over me, but I felt cold inside, stripped bare and remade all at once. I caught sight of Evelyn across the room, laughing as if she hadn't just burned down every bridge I had. I thought of the years I had spent stitching myself into this family's quilt, only to find they had cut me out without a second thought. You poisoned the people I loved against me, I thought, a fierce clarity sharpening every breath. Now I'll tear the mask off you before this night ends. The final exposure. I watched the room like someone standing behind glass, observing a world I no longer belonged to. The polished floors gleamed under the chandelier light, the hum of conversation buzzing around me like a cloud I couldn't quite breathe through. Evelyn stood in the center of it all, radiant, beaming, soaking up the attention like a flower turning to the sun. She raised her glass, the crystal catching the light, and a hush rippled through the room. "Everyone," she said, voice warm and commanding, "I have an announcement to make." The crowd leaned in, eager, expectant. I stood perfectly still, the cold detachment in my chest anchoring me more firmly than any hand ever had. Evelyn flashed a brilliant smile, her left hand rising with theatrical slowness to show off the glittering diamond on her finger. "Donovan and I are engaged." Cheers erupted. Applause filled the room like a tide swallowing everything whole. I barely heard it. The noise dulled, muted by the roaring in my ears. I was a spectator in my own story once again, a footnote in Evelyn's carefully edited narrative, but not for much longer. As the crowd surged around her, congratulating, laughing, celebrating, I moved forward, slow, deliberate. The moment stretched thin as paper, ready to tear. I stopped a few feet away, close enough that Donovan's smile faltered when he met my eyes. I kept my voice steady, calm, the steel beneath it unmistakable. "Funny," I said, loud enough for the room to turn. "You two always were close, even before my father passed, right, Donovan?" The room stilled. Evelyn's smile froze, the diamond on her hand catching the light like a blade. Donovan paled, his hands twitching at his sides. I didn't flinch. "I remember," I said. "The long talks behind closed doors, the late nights, the way Dad started drinking more, smiling less." A low murmur rippled through the guests. Donovan opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Evelyn's face hardened, a mask slipping into place, but it was too late. The cracks were there for everyone to see now. I turned slightly, addressing the room without needing a podium, without needing Evelyn's permission. "And tonight," I said, "I had my own announcement to make." I placed a hand gently on my stomach, feeling the small, fierce flutter of life inside me. "I'm pregnant." A stunned silence swallowed the room whole. I let it sit there, heavy and undeniable. "I wasn't planning to make this about me," I added, voice soft but unwavering. "But new life deserves to begin with truth, not lies." I let the words sink in, their weight heavier than any applause could have been. Slowly, I turned my back on them all. The weight I had carried for years, the longing, the humiliation, the desperate need to belong, peeled off me with every step toward the door. They couldn't erase me anymore. I had chosen to leave. A new kind of silence. The late afternoon sun spilled into my small apartment, casting long golden beams across the floor where half-filled boxes waited. I sat cross-legged by the window, taping up the last carton of baby clothes and secondhand kitchenware, feeling a quietness settle over me. Not emptiness, not loneliness, but something else. A deliberate quiet. The kind you choose for yourself after you've survived the noise. I leaned back against the wall, letting the light warm my skin, and closed my eyes for a moment. There was no rush anymore, no frantic scramble to please or explain, just breath, just space, just me. As I folded the last sweater into the top of a box, flashes from the night of the party flickered behind my eyes, Evelyn's diamond ring catching the light, Donovan's pale face, the stunned silence that had fallen after I spoke my truth. They no longer paralyzed me. They stung, yes, but like old scars on a cold morning, an ache you learn to live with. My phone buzzed against the hardwood floor. I picked it up without urgency. A group text from the family. I didn't even read it. My thumb hovered over the notification before swiping it away, the screen returning to black. No rage, no heartbreak, just a simple understanding. Some invitations aren't meant to be accepted. I pulled on my coat and stepped out into the crisp air, the leaves along the sidewalk fluttering like shy greetings. The doctor's office was quiet, soft classical music filling the waiting room. I sat with my hands resting over my growing belly, feeling a flutter, a small, brave movement reminding me that new beginnings didn't come loudly. They came softly, persistently, like heartbeats. The ultrasound screen lit up, and there it was again, tiny, strong, stubborn, the life that I had chosen. On the way home, I stopped at a little boutique downtown, the kind where everything felt a bit too expensive, but undeniably hopeful. I bought a onesie that said "Brave Little One" across the front. I smiled without thinking, the first real smile in months, and realized that hope didn't have to be big to be powerful. Sometimes it fit in the palm of your hand. Later that week, I sat with 2 friends over steaming mugs of tea. Not the old friends, not the ones tied to a past I no longer belonged to. These were new people, real people, people who didn't measure love in obligations or appearances. Family, I realized, isn't what you're born into. It's what you build when you dare to demand more. My new circle was small, messy, imperfect, and more real than anything I had left behind. That night, after the dishes were washed and the world grew quiet again, I sat on the porch wrapped in an old quilt, feeling the baby's soft movements under my hand, the stars stretched out overhead, indifferent and endless. "You'll never have to beg to be seen," I whispered into the cool darkness. "Not from me." The wind caught my words and carried them away, out into the night, into the space where beginnings are born. There's no need for the past to define the way forward. Looking back, I realize now that sometimes the family we're born into isn't the family we need to grow. True belonging doesn't come from shared bloodlines. It comes from people who see you, hear you, and love you without conditions. It's okay to walk away from what hurts you even if it carries the name family. Choosing yourself is not selfish. It's survival. It's healing. Life doesn't always hand you closure wrapped in neat little bows. Sometimes it's messy, bittersweet, and leaves questions you'll carry into your next chapter. But moving forward anyway, that's the real triumph. What about you? Have you ever had to choose yourself over expectations? I'd love to hear your story. If this video touched your heart, leave a comment with a 1-inch or share where you're watching from. If it didn't resonate, let me know why. I'm always here to listen. And if you want more stories that reach into the quiet corners of your soul, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Your journey matters here. End of Fan Kwai.